All right, guys, finishing off chapter 4. You can interact with the operating system to not only get input and output, but the operating system's got a big chunk of files. It's got your hard drive system. You can get directories. You can load your directories. You can examine the directories. You can figure out if a file is a file or a directory. This could easily be a whole series of lectures, or at least an entire lecture, but I'm only going to cover it kind of briefly because I want to get to talking about classes. Classes as in being object-oriented programming. So if we look at this, what is it doing? It's importing a library called OS, and they're getting the current directory, which is where your current PY file is running. And then they're listing the files in that directory. And then they're iterating through that list of files in the directory. And if it's a Python file, in other words, if it's got .py in its file name, they're printing its name out. So let's do that. We're going to use get CWD and listdir. What lecture are we on here? That goof had called this one L when it was really the last one was JKL. Yeah, this is the real lecture L. And I denoted that correctly here for week 6. No, I didn't. HIJ. So we're on lecture K. I'm not sure where that lecture L came from. Please always include a header block, although I started doing it in the docstring format, didn't I? Why to do that? Finish chapter 4 and begin talking about object-oriented programming. So, what is this code going to do? List all files in a directory. Why am I doing that? Stop that. So CWD, wait, we better import OS. The current working directory is equal to os.getCWD, right? And heck, let's just print the CWD out right now. Just for funsies, let's run it. All right, and so that's my current working directory. Users, Jeffrey Thompson documents, because that's where I saved my PY file. If I'd saved my PY file somewhere else, that would show up in a different place. So now I'm going to get a list of files in my current working directory. And they show one way of doing it. I'm going to show you another way, and then I'm going to change it to the way that they did it. So the name of the method that they use is listdir. That sounds great. Let's use listdir. So let's do dir list is equal to os.listdir parentheses quote dot end quote in parentheses. And I think if we leave this off, it'll just list the current working directory anyways. But that's also what a dot means as your current working directory. If you're using a command prompt or a terminal and you type dir space dot, well, excuse me, it's ls if you're using Linux or Mac, ls dot, it just lists the current directory. Whereas if you do ls or dir and then specify a subdirectory, like library, then we get a list of all the files that are in that subdirectory. Okay. Let's see if that works. And then we're just going to change it to not have anything in it. I don't know. Nothing wrong with having anything in it. What they would do in here is having CWD though. So let's print the dir list. It's going to be a list, so it's not going to look pretty when we print it out. Ooh, nothing in it. All right. That didn't work, so let's do exactly what they did. CWD. Still didn't work. Oh, it did work. It's just that idle is suppressing. I don't know if it's only the Mac version that does this or if the PC version does it as well. Squeezed text. If I click on that, I get to see the entire directory listing, right? So I've got a lot of files here in that directory. So are any of them PY files? Well, firstly, let's print them all, right? So for value in dir list, print that value, right? We're just going to print them all out. And let's print current directory equals, in quote, comma directory there, right? All right, so that's my current working directory, and here is a list of files in it. You'll see a whole bunch of Dungeons and Dragons and Tunnels and Trolls kind of stuff here. I did see a PY file go by, so let's modify this so that it only prints out PY files. Let's do this. Target extension equals .py. That's what we want to see. And so if target extension is in the value, print the value. That should list only Python files. Or if something else happens to have .py in it. Anyway, see, here's all my py files. What if we wanted to see a listing of all subdirectories? What do I mean by that? Well, a directory can have a directory in it, and a directory can have, you know, a directory inside that. Well, we might want to see what kind of item this is, because right now, if I just did this, maybe if I did that, it would print everything because there's no filter anymore. Let's see if that's the case. Right, so it's printing everything. These include files and they include directories. But we should be able to inspect these items to see what they are. So let's look at the PowerPoint. chdir would change our current working directory. Listdir without a space there gets a list of files. Makedir makes a new directory. Remove path, we could delete a file. Rename old to new, we could rename a file. So pretty much everything you could do at a DOS prompt, at a command prompt, at a terminal. Remove the directory, and then CEF holds a variable that holds a separator character of the current file system. Well, you can always use / as your separator character, whether it's in Windows or Linux or Mac. So I just tend to use / because if you're going to use backslashes, it's kind of Windows specific. So I always use / if I'm specifying file names. Exists, we could check to see if something exists. How about isdir and isPath to print out whether something is a directory, isdir or isFile. So let's make this a little bit fancier. We're going to write a program that lists the files in a directory. I don't know why I loaded up Windows. Go away. So isFile is equal to os.isFile parentheses v. Check to see if it's a file. Isdir is equal to os.isdir v. File size is equal to os dot get size. I think that's what it is. However, the size is only going to make sense if it is a file. It doesn't go down and calculate all the subdirectories. Just kind of like, you know, this is checking it if it's a file, but if it's a directory, it's not going to add them all up. So I'm expecting it to say 0 if it's a directory. And then norm case converts a path to a path name appropriate for the current file system. Well, we could do that, right? File name is equal to os.normCase v. Normally I don't do that. And let's print that stuff out. Print started contemplating about whether we want to actually print the word file or dir, right? So how about if is file, then we're going to create a kind variable. If is file, kind is equal to file, right? Else, colon, or elif is file, excuse me, is dir, then the kind is equal to quote dir. Else, who knows what it is? A kind is equal to quote, we'll see if we got any like that. All right, so let's print some of this stuff out. Let's print the kind. So kind, but I want it to be 4 characters wide because it supports, you know, some of these I made 3 and some of these are 4. So I'm going to say, please print it 4 characters wide. And then let's print the size, file size. And I don't know, you think 10 characters is enough for that? 12 characters is enough for that? That'd be a pretty large file if it's 12. Maybe that should go at the end, I don't know. And then let's print the file name. And if it's the last thing to print, then maybe I don't need to specify size because I don't have anything coming after it, so I don't need to specify columns. Norm case, that's not what it was called. What was it called? Thought it was called norm case. So there. Oh, excuse me, these are parts of os.path. So I'm going to have to prefix where instead of just prefixing with os, I'm going to have to do os.path. os.path. No, wait, that one was okay. But this is os.path. This is os.path. This is os.path. That ought to work better. Or not. Must have been one more OS that I didn't change. Go do that. Oh, right there. os.path. I'm going to cut that and paste it with the others so that's a little more obvious. Right there. So here we're getting our information about the file. Here we're kind of creating some, you know, descriptive text about it. And here we're printing it out inside our for loop. When we specify get size, we need to pass in the file name. See, again, if I'd listed them all like that, that would have made it obvious. Wasn't paying attention. There we go. All right, and here's my directory listing, right? Some of them are directories, some of them are files. Some of them are too long, right? I saw one wrap around. Okay, a whole bunch of D&D stuff. I should save this somewhere else. A whole bunch of stuff. Okay, well, whatever, right? We don't need to see these keep going. We could restrict them to the PY files, but if we did, we would not see any directories. Now I'm seeing this say that things that are directories actually do have file sizes, and I'm impressed if it can really do that. I know that's not true. I know that my Google Drive has way more than 8416 bytes in it. My Google Drive's got, gigabytes in it, so I know that that's wrong. So why don't we do this? If it's a directory, right? If kind is equal to dir, then I'm just going to set the file size variable equal to that, right? So it won't print anything out. Now, if I was going to do some math with it, that'd be a bad idea because you couldn't do math with that, and it'd be better for me to set it to 0. But I'm not doing math with it, so I don't mind doing that. All right, and so now the ones that are directories have no size whatsoever. And you could write a program that would open up that directory, add all those file sizes together, and open up any subdirectories of that. So like, let's just list out the directories, right? So we're going to do if kind equals, or how about just if is dir, print those out. And then I could have done that right here, right? Either way would have worked. If is kind, if is dir, if it's a directory, then set that equal to there. Okay, so now when we run it, it's only going to list directories. What if we wanted to create a new list that was only a list of directories? Directories is equal to, and I'm going to use list comprehension. For every value in my list, what did I call my list? Dir list. For every value in dir list, right? My brain's spaced on this. Let me pause, and I'm going to think about it. All right, you can use something else. It's called filter and lambda, but you can also just stick an if statement in here in the newer versions of Python. So for every value in the dir list, if os.path dot is dir parentheses v, right? And then you have to fill in what value actually gets added to the list, right? There we go. That ought to do it. Let's print out the directories. See if that works. I should have broken this up into separate functions so that I could stop doing some of these things if I didn't, whatever. Comment them out as I needed to. You minimize a file and then bring it back, runs much more quickly. There we go. And so here's my list of directories, right? And I could make another one that was a list of files using the same idea. Files equals every v for v in dir list if os.path.isFile, parentheses v in parentheses. And then we could print our files, right? I'm not going to even do that, right? Because these are getting long. And this code worked great, but I think I'm going to comment it out. Just because we've seen it work and it's taking a long time to run on mine. I mean, I guess that's okay. I can always minimize it and bring it back. And then you could use a for loop to step through the directories, right? Or you could use a for loop to step through all the files and do whatever you wanted to with them. All right, what if we only wanted to get certain extensions? Already kind of talked about this, right? It would be an interesting challenge to write it in such a way that you could say, okay, I only want to see PDFs and Word docs, because then we're doing multiple extensions. What I would do is I would probably just repeat the code, right? We might make an empty list. I'm kind of winging this. And the extension we want is PDF and Word docs, right? So PDF, comma, and then docx. Guess we can go ahead and put the dots in there. That's, of course, going to leave off my old, Windows 3.1 Word docs, which would just be that. Guess I could put that in there. Docx, right? So there we go. And then we would need a for loop, right? So for every extension in extension list, right? Let's make that plural, right? Then files plus equals this, right? Every value in the dir list if it's a file and extension in V, right? Maybe we should change V to file name, right? So that would look a little bit clearer, but just accept, please, that, we're stepping through a directory list. So that's going to be the file name and it's a short variable. That ought to do it. We ought to be able to list as many extension types as we want here, and it would step through each one. I could be wrong. Kind of winging that one. Let's see if that works. All right, I'm going to minimize it, bring it back so that it'll print quickly. Right? Okay, and so now it's got all of my PDFs and my Word docs. And I could print them out in a prettier fashion, right, with a for loop. Tell you what, why don't we put this code, the directory listing code, in its own function so that we can use it over and over, because this is a useful function. Let's just call it print directory or something like that. So it's going to take a list variable called dir list. So we're going to write a function that takes a list variable named dir list and does all this on it. Okay, so def print dir, right? And it takes a variable called dir list and it does all that. And I'm going to have to tab it over correctly. So everything after my for loop needs to be tabbed, right? Just like that. Okay. And I'm going to add a doc string here saying what this does. Pretty print file listing where the list may be files or directories. Both, right? How about we use the word and rather than or there? That's what our function does. So pretty print a list, whether the dir list may be a list of file names or directory names. Yeah, I think that's pretty specific. So down here, when we've calculated our file list of PDFs and DOCs, let's call that, right? Print directory files. And here we could do print directory based on the directories. I think that'll work. And we're going to take this comment, get all files in a directory, and just put that right here, right? So this gets the current working directory. Get all files and dirs in the directory. That's what that's doing. I don't think we're using target extension right now, so I'm going to get rid of that. And here we're building a list that only contains directories. Directories using list comprehension. And then we're building a list that contains only files of a specified extension using list comprehension. This will contain the list of files. These are our desired extensions. Sometimes adding comments makes code harder to read rather than easier to read. I do want you to comment your code, but it's just something to consider. Once you add a whole bunch of comments, the code becomes more difficult to read. Probably would be easier to read as, you know, as code if it did not have any of these comments here. You know, if I remove that block of comment and that block of comment, if you were an experienced Python programmer, it would be cleaner and you'd be able to read it more easily. However, we're not all experienced Python programmers yet, are we? Let's run it and see what I've goofed up. All right, so that's our list of directories. I'm gonna, it didn't print any files whatsoever. I thought we had that working. Well, there they are. I must have modified this thing up here, this print dir list, to only allow directories. And that's the case, right? That is in fact the case. My print directory, I made it only print out directories and not files. You know, that's a useful function perhaps, but let's not do that. Minimize and then bring back. Boom, here's all of our PDFs, right? And what if we wanted to open one of those PDFs, right? What if I wanted to open mappingpaper.pdf, something like that? There's an easy way to do it, but unfortunately it's Windows specific and we're not all running Windows. So we're gonna write a function that'll do it for more platforms than just Windows. So def launch file, well, there is one way to do it. Using the web browser. I believe this is gonna work. Import web browser. Let me look at my little page that I had this loaded up on. Webbrowser.open. And so if the file to open is equal to, and I just copied and pasted one of those file names, mappingpaper.pdf, right? web browser.open file to open. Now the web browser is really for opening URLs, right? But most browsers can open files as well. If you specified a file path, then a browser is, you know, Chrome or whatever is just as happy to open that file. So we're going to try this. Let's see if this works. Minimize it. Bring it back. I can't see that I say that it worked. Or I can't see that it worked. What if it had been a path? Let's just see if it works at all. Import web browser. Web browser.open google.com, right? Is that going to work? True, huh? Maybe I should have read a little bit more about it. Oh, it says it doesn't work on OS X. It returns true, but doesn't actually do anything. Fine. You can use os.system to try to launch it. Let's give that a shot. Import OS. os.system parentheses google.com. Doesn't look like it's working either. os.system parentheses quote that file name. Doesn't seem to be working. Okay, the way that I knew was going to work, and I had referenced it. I pulled it up on a web page. Let me go and find it again. Okay, the problem is that there's a nice function for opening a file with its registered application, right? So just like double clicking on a DOC file should launch Word, and an Excel file should launch, you know, Excel and stuff like that. os.star file launches the specified file. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on Mac, and I don't think that it works on Linux. And so here's a little bit of code that we can use to get that to work. And forgive me for just copying and pasting, but you can do the same thing from the notes. So since that didn't work. And so it opens a file name, but the first thing it does is see what the platform is. sys.platform. Well, let's find out what sys.platform does. Let's go to the command prompt, import sys, and then type in sys.platform. On Mac, the platform is Darwin. Darwin is the name of the Unix subsystem that the Mac supports, the BSD version of Unix that it supports. Darwin's an offshoot of that. And on Windows, it would say something else, very Windows specific. So what they're doing here is if the platform is Windows 32, then run, use it, doing it with start file. Otherwise, they build a string based on whether the platform is Darwin, and if it's not, then they set it to this Linux command. Now that's kind of a cryptic way of writing it. For clarity's sake, I would have done this. If sys.platform equals quote Darwin, Mac version, then the opener we're going to use is called open. Else colon, the opener is equal to xdg-open, right? Or you can do that in one line of code if you want to do it like this. And I haven't been doing it, right? You know, x is equal to 3 if, you know, if name is equal to Bob, else x, else 4, right? You can write it like that, right? X is either going to be 3, but if name is equal to Bob, Otherwise, it's going to be 4. Now, I don't like writing that. It's a little bit too terse for my taste. But if you become a professional Python programmer, you'll see that and you might want to start using it. I don't want to right now. It's not clear to me. All right. And then it launches a sub-process using a specified thing, either using the open program that's available to you on the Mac or XDG open program that's available to you on Linux. I believe, if I just type in open in a Mac terminal, we see all the ways that you can open a file. So it is open is actually a program that will run other programs. All right, so, and then we can open our file. I forget which file I was going to open. File name equals input, parentheses, quote, open which file. I think I typed a 0 there rather than an O. All right, nope, just looks weird to me. And then let's actually try to open it, right? Open file, file name. But maybe we should check to see if it exists, right? Before we try to open it. That's what this function is for, os.path.exists. If os.path.exists file name and os.path.isFile file name, then it's a good file and we can try to open it, right? Maybe we should put that code up here in our open file function. Else colon print file does not exist or is a directory, not a file. Minimize, maximize, open which file? And let's pick one. Wasn't there one about maps? Well, here's one. And it opened it. Isn't that pretty cool? You can run other programs from within Python. And it's real easy under Windows. And it's not the other application's fault that it's not as easy under them. It's not the Mac's fault that it's not as easy on Mac. It's just that the Python developers, for some reason, did not provide a function which would work on all platforms. And I'm sure that there's a reason for that. But we can accommodate that, right? By going to, did not mean to launch iTunes, go away. By using a function like this. So maybe I should open that and save that, as a separate piece of code that I could reference in the future, right? Like that. I should add a good doc file comment on it. I'm going to save it as the name open file. Opens the specified file. I can't see what I'm typing here because there's a toolbar that you can't see covering my screen. Accommodating differences in Mac, Linux, and Windows. And we could put that code there, that if statement, inside that code. So it'd be useful, right? So if the file exists, then it's great. But instead, we need to say, if the file exists, do all this stuff, and tab it over, right? Else we need to print our error message. And so now I could just import this if I wanted to, and it would work great for me. I could go over here and add import open file, and then open file.open file. Why am I having trouble getting in my other window? Okay, anyways, go back here. So if I wanted to, I could do import open file.py. I forget if you have to add the py or not. I'm going to try leaving it off. And then I'm going to remove all of this and just try calling open underscore file dot open underscore file. I know it looks silly, but it's in a module called open file, and the name of the function is open file. So let's just roll with it. Let's see if that works. Minimize, maximize. Open that file. It's how to program an Apollo moon mission computer. Paste it, run it, and it launches it. So, oh, it's not what it is after all. It's Lego instructions, whatever. Okay, so open which file? It worked. It worked. We now have a module called open file with some very useful code in it. Trying to figure out what I want to comment about this, or if I want to move this to its own file. I think I'm going to move it to its own. Delete this because it's in its own file. It'll be included in the notes, right? Okay. All righty. When I said we could do a whole lecture on this topic alone, we have done a whole lecture on this topic alone. And that's okay. Anything else in the chapter we want to cover? Basically, I want you to have the idea that you can do this kind of thing. You can talk to your computer's operating system to get, lists of files, to change your directory, to check to see if a file is a directory or a file, and get the size of it. Did I ever get norm case to work? I don't remember. All right, and so our chapter summary, you can read the summary. We know what a text file is. We know what a file object is. It opens a connection to a text file for either reading or writing. We talked about how to open a file for reading and for writing. And a for loop can treat an input file as a sequence of lines. Let's get text files. Do we have any text files? Let's list those as well, right? .txt. Minimize, maximize. There's our text files. Let's open up some old lecture. This looks like a nice, good long one. And there we go, right? So say we wanted to open that file. Let's just do one more example of text file. File name is equal to that, right? And then file is equal to open that file name, comma, quote, R for reading, end quote, right? And then for every line in the file, for line in file, colon, strip the line, or at least strip the stuff off the end. That's all I'm going to do is strip the stuff off the end because I don't want to remove the tabs at the beginning, since this might be Python code, and in fact it is. So we're going to use R strip the stuff off the end of the line. So line is equal to line dot R strip. That'll remove the carriage returns and stuff at the end of the line. Do we want to print blank lines? Sure, why not? So then if we hadn't wanted to, we could use something like this. If LE in parentheses line is greater than 0, let us skip blank lines. Let's not. So we're just going to print the line, right? Do something useful, that data. All right. Now, this is not the file it's going to open in the other way. I just needed something to answer this question, right? All right, it's opening a file, but apparently there's a lot of blank lines in it. I wasn't expecting to see that. Where's our actual data? I mean, I could make a file. Let's just open our own file, right? What's this file name? lecturek.py. Let's just do that. So our file name is going to be lecturek.py. Did I make it a capital L? Yes, I did. All righty. It's printing out blanks again. What's the deal? Was I not supposed to store the result of R strip? I should just go back and look at the code examples from last time, right? I'll do that if it doesn't work this time. Yeah, there it is. That's what I was supposed to do. Sorry about that. In Java, it works differently. Just got done teaching another course. So anyways, strip trailing blanks and new lines. That's just so that it won't have a blank line between everything. Okay, so that's our example for opening a file and reading it, right? And then you should always close your file afterwards. We saw bad things happen just at last lecture if we don't do that. All right, gang, let's end this one here. I think we did cover some really good stuff. So pretty soon I want to be able to do JavaScript and HTML and stuff like that, but there's a little bit more that I want to cover here. So I guess the next week we're going to spend on classes and the graphical user interface. And then after that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the JavaScript and HTML lectures optional. I'll go ahead and post them. I'll post them at the beginning of next week so that you can look at them, but you don't have to, right? They're just optional. You can watch them if you want to, because otherwise I don't think that we'll be adequately able to cover both classes and graphical user interfaces and let you have time to work on your projects, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. I'm going to terminate this one and then start working on that recording.